Hey everybody, I thought I was going to get a little controversial with you. Well, I wouldn't say it's not controversial per se, it's more a topic that has been an endless debate since probably programming was invented. And that debate is about comments. Comments! Yes, believe it or not, comments is probably one of the most debated topics in programming. You know, what's a good comment? Is a lot of comments a good thing? It's a bad thing? How do you comment? What should a comment be about? When do you add one? When don't you add one? All these questions. So I'm gonna give you my 2 cents on the matter, and because you know I am a truth speaker, a speaker of truth. The truth is what I speak. You can just ignore everybody else and listen to me, because you know all those other people who are telling you something they're wrong and I'm right. That's a law somewhere, I think. Anywho, so one of my philosophy when it comes to comments is that you are remembering that good code, or well, any code for that matter, is read more than it is written. In essence, you're going to read code at least 10 times as many times as you're going to write code in general. Now, a few of my colleagues like to say that, you know, they use that example and then they say that, hey, that means that you should really make an effort to comment your code well and like do all of that really nice, you know, refactoring and making sure that everything is spotless, because you're going to read it so many times, right? And I agree. You should absolutely make an effort to make sure that you have clean code. But clean code does not mean comments. Now, I will make the argument that if you can, you should write code that is so well structured and small enough that I can glance at what it's doing and figure out what it is about, because of the same phenomenon that you will see some people who like imperative programming versus declarative programming, like they want to be able to read everything in a flow. Like these are usually the people you'll see who make functions that are a few hundred lines of code long. These people have what I call this distrust of abstractions. It messes their thought process up if they can't get and it's such an individual thing. It's you remember in a previous video I was making a comment about abstractions that like some of my colleagues would say, oh, I don't want you to put everything in a function because I don't know what's happening in that function. And I kind of go like, it's not so much about it's not about my code, it's about your distrust of my code, because the native APIs in JavaScript and like in any programming language, I mean, you have APIs and libraries that other people wrote for you, and these are abstractions. You don't feel a need to go inside of those and figure out what's happening under, you know, if you have a hash map, do you know how a hash map works under the hood in Java or C# or Elixir or whatever? No, you don't, and you don't care. You don't trust, because you trust the code. That's what it is about. Same thing goes here. Like if you have if you put, like in Java you have getters and setters, and in essence what you're going to have to like consider is that if you do a index, this is I'm not saying that you shouldn't do this because it's like it's a pattern or a convention in Java, but say in Swift, which hasn't really gotten that far, if you create a getter or a setter for a property on an object, if you call set foo, that's an abstraction, which means that if I now need to kind of know, I'm going to distrust that. In theory, I would distrust that code and have to look inside of it to be sure that all that is actually, because there's no promise that this is what it's doing. It's inferred that that's what it's going to do, but there's no promise. If there's just a property declaration on that object, then it is as clear as it humanly is possible to make it. You know that if foo is equal to 1, that's all there is to it. there's no function, there's no abstraction, so you can trust that that's what's happening. And that is going to tie into what comments is about. So if you create a comment, that is an expression of what your code is supposed to do, but it is not the code. It's not the simplest thing you can make. It's something that if you're reading that comment, then you're trusting that as much as you are trusting an abstraction. Because I don't know about you guys, but if I see a really complex piece of code, it doesn't matter how many comments you have, or rather how like if you have a big block that is describing what a function does, I am still going to check that code. I'm still going to check it, because regardless of how good you are at expressing yourself, that's why we have like lawyers, that's why we have politicians that spin words, because what's very clear to you, even if you are a poet with describing like a master of the of whatever language you're speaking, like English in this case, so you're not going to be able to communicate through words as well as you're going to do through code. That's the same thing. It's in essence the same thing with mathematics. Think about it. Language is subjective, all languages, but not mathematics. Why? Because mathematics is universal for every single context on the planet, like everywhere. That's why it's mathematics. It's exact, it's precise. Code is the same way. If you can read code, it's always going to be better than reading a comment, because a comment can get out of date. It's basically extra documentation. A comment can be just plain old incorrect. Now, and there are other issues as well. So what I argue is less is more. And my golden rule for comments is if I read a piece of code, let's say that you have an API integration. Let's say that that's the case. And let's say that you need to, there's what I call inferred information. There's overhead knowledge to be had here. There's more to this than what meets the eye. If I read the code, I don't necessarily know what that API is going to give me, and I don't know what the assumptions are about this API. So a comment that just says that, oh yeah, we're going to go hit this URL over there, and we're expecting something that looks like this because we're on this version of that external API, blah blah blah. Because my code is not contacting like an unknown server somewhere on the interwebs, and a comment there would be it's very useful. It's the same kind of thing where, let's say you have filters or middlewares in a really long validation pipeline that finally is going to hit your controller action and return a response. If you have something in between there which is depending on something happening earlier in the request lifecycle, that's also a very nice comment to just put there and then say, yeah, this is doing this because this happened before this is going to happen. Do you see what I'm saying? You're not trying to tell me what the code is doing, because the code should be written well enough that I can see that, because I'm going to read it, trust me. I don't care how well commented your code is, I'm going to read your code. Always. That's the way I'm built, and I'm pretty sure that most people will agree. So don't waste my time with a lot of comments that try to describe your code. Take that extra time that you would put into making a comment into making the code nicer, and unit test it for the love of God and whatever entity you're praying to. And instead, comment the stuff that you cannot express through code.